Record, and we're live. So can we just for a moment review the devices we have out in front of ourselves?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. I have in front of me, and I'll tell you how I normally do this, but I'll tell you right now, I am Skyping you from a MacBook.
Okay.
And I am using AirPods actually to conduct the call.
Nice. Where'd you get those?
Where'd I get them? I ordered them when they were being pre-ordered. There was a very brief window of time on the first day they went on sale that BestBuy.com had them in stock.
Okay. I'm still waiting to get mine when they show up at a store somewhere near me. So.
Well, actually, funny you mentioned that. I ordered them from Apple before they went on sale on Best Buy, and they were back ordered for like over a month. I actually just got the other pair and need to bring them to an Apple store and exchange them. But if you in any way are interested in me just sending them to your house, would be. I don't know if there's a reason you're waiting for the store, if it's just to avoid the wait. But I have a pair just sitting in my office.
I could very much be talked into that. So. Just let me.
Okay.
Just let me know.
Okay. Yep, because they're fantastic. I didn't anticipate using them for this until I decided that I would record on my iPad.
Nope.
But
now, are you speaking when you're listening right now? Are you talking to me on Skype via the Mac with the AirPods? Is that how you're doing it?
Yes. Okay. So. Yeah, I am. So I've got a MacBook, and the MacBook, I'm connected through AirPods. So I'm listening. I'm talking through the microphone of the AirPods and hearing you through the earbuds of the AirPods. Right. And we are just having a Skype conversation on the Mac. And that's the only thing. It's funny because that's the only thing that the Mac is being used for in this circumstance. Typically what I do is I run my microphone through my Mac and I open up Logic and I record straight into Logic through my microphone while at the same time having the Skype call and recording the Skype call using an app called Audio Hijack, which amongst many things it can do that are amazing with audio on your Mac, one of the things it can do is just simply record the output of an application on your computer. Okay. So I typically take that recording from Audio Hijack and I drag that into my Logic project alongside my recording of my own microphone. And if the other guest recorded their own audio like you are, then I use the Audio Hijack to sync the two audio files. In some cases, if someone does not have a microphone, I just use their audio from the Skype call directly, and then I kind of play with the levels a little bit and edit it to where I like it. So predominantly my voice is being heard through the higher quality microphone. Okay.
And then you've got a microphone that you're running, you said a USB mic, right, of some kind.
Yeah. So what I have now is the Skype call on my Mac is just for the purpose of us Skyping. Actually hearing each other.
Yep.
Right. So I've got that one of my USB microphones plugged directly into my iPad right now, per your suggestion. I am going through the Lightning to USB connection dongle, and I am recording into an app called Ferrite, which is what you use as well to record your audio.
Yep, that's correct.
Now, what drew you to Ferrite? Where there's a lot of apps on the App Store for iOS that can record audio. What about Ferrite? Like I've heard about Ferrite from the Six Colors blog. Are you familiar with that?
No, not. I mean, I think I've read it one point. Colors. It's an old Mac. I mean, it's been around for a while, right? The Six Colors blog, going back to the rainbows of Apple, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a callback to that. It's actually only a 1 or 2 year old blog. It's Jason Snell's blog. He used to write for Macworld.
Yep.
And he does a lot of. He's like an iPad Pro power user, he writes a lot about using his iPad, and one of the things he writes about is podcasting. Now, he actually, I think, has figured out a way to record the call, to like conduct the call and record into the microphone at the same time. I'm not maybe I'm mistaken. Like, he's done a number of blog posts that I've saved for later, and I need to revisit.
Yeah, I just learned about it through Fraser Spears, who does all of his podcasting with Ferrite. And then I think I've seen other people allude to it, just, bloggers, maybe Gruber or Daryl, how do you say his name? Jim Dalrymple. Dalrymple, right? There we go. I always mispronounce his name, Dalrymple. And either one of those two guys or their blogs mention it as well. But when Fraser Spears said it was a way to go, when we were starting up this podcast idea, our first attempt was on Skype and recording a Skype call, and that didn't work so well. People, in particular a guy named Lauren Finkelstein, who's in New York, who listens to our blog, got back in touch with us and said, yeah, I couldn't hear some of the people on the call. So his suggestion was, Lauren actually said some of the blogs are recording, just everybody records locally and then somebody mixes the audio. And then that was the result. So that's how we came around to doing this.
Yeah. So, there are some web services that will do this now, too. One of them is called Zencaster.
Okay.
And these are apps that run in the web, and it does everything. So it sets up it does the call and the recording and the editing for you. So you log in, you hit record, it records to your whatever microphone is going into your computer, and then you invite someone with a little email or a text link to the conversation, and then the web app just records the whole thing. It even will edit out long pauses and add some, reverb.
Huh. I wonder how much that costs, or that service costs. It's got to cost something. Some
of it is free.
Okay.
I don't recall. I tried to use it once. I didn't get very far. It's always risky, but I never really learn a new way of doing something until I have an actual project where I'm really relying on it. That's why I'm trying this now on a real episode. So I have in front of me as well a backup H4n recorder just in case anything does not go according to plan.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, so I mean it's fascinating, but you've inspired me to try. I mean, I don't know that I'm really simplifying my process, because I could be doing all of this on just the Mac, but I was really curious about what it might feel like to edit audio on a touchscreen. So,
yeah, I'm running just incidentally. I've just got my iPad Air 2 that I'm recording into, and then I've got my Snowball mic, and then I'm talking to you over my iPhone with Skype. And so that's my workflow, and that's worked out pretty well for our podcast as well.
So that's actually a really great. So I just kind of launched into talking to you. Maybe this is a good moment to mention your podcast, since you are today's guest. I have a little thing I say, a little voiceover I do before each episode, but you are this week's guest. This week we are talking about scanning documents, and you are Chris Russell.
Yep, I'm Chris Russell. I'm a middle school music teacher currently in the Twin Cities of Minnesota, and I blog about things about technology and also things about ukulele at techandmusiced.com, and Paul Shimmons and I have a blog or a podcast that we created and have started last fall called the MET Podcast, Music Education Technology Podcast, and we've had kind of a hiatus because we're doing our middle school musical right now, and when Paul and I normally record is in the afternoon after a school day, but right now we've got kids all that time. So once we get to the end of March here, we'll be picking back up with some more interviews in the near future. So that's kind of what I do.
I've been enjoying the show.
Thanks. We appreciate that. There's been a lot of fun parts, because one of the things we like to do is to talk to people about their backgrounds and why they do things or what their history is, because so much of this technology, you lose fact that, like in the iOS world, that sometimes it's one or two developers on a project. So to learn that it's not a large corporation or a company with 300 employees that's putting out a piece of software gives you a different insight into what's there, and also the heart of those people. So there's been some really neat interviews, including Aaron Nelson from the unRealBook app that you can use on your iPad to use for sheet music. Also, the other person who was really fun to talk to was from Flat.io. or not Flat. Was it Flat? No, it was Raphael from Newzik, and to talk to a couple of those guys, and they were long distance, Hawaii, and Raphael was in France. So to talk to those people was kind of fun.
That's cool. Yeah, Newzik, I need to go back and listen to that one because that's not an application I'm as familiar with.
I'm in the same boat as you.
Well,
I it's not my primary tool right now, but Newzik has this music XML function that's really set up for the next generation of digital music, because the problem with scanning music that we'll talk about later is that you're frozen into what it looks like. In fact, I was just at a ukulele kind of a festival yesterday, and that became an issue of discussion with people because some of these ukulele songs have these weird DSs and repeats in the middle of them, and they're impossible for people that don't really have a music reading background to follow. And in the future, if that stuff was just digital, it could just flow naturally from page to page without having to worry about DS markings and repeats and all that stuff. So yeah, Newzik is kind of a neat app.
Yeah, it seems really interesting. Well, so I guess it's worth saying this is like gonna be episode 4 or 5 of this. I'm calling this season 2, which is all about my new book. That'll be in the voiceover, but I'm having a special guest come on to talk about each chapter of the book, and this is going to be all about scanning documents and music. But you're actually going to come on again, and we're going to do another episode on, tablet software for annotating and studying and reading scores, and I'm kind of looking forward to that. So this is like, I'm gonna hoping we can save some of that discussion. I mean, my philosophy about this season of the podcast is that it will be a counterpoint to the book, and that it will add and supplement a lot of the stuff I'm talking about in the book, not so much just like regurgitate all the facts that are in there.
And the other challenge is technology keeps shifting on us too. So if you write something, as long as you have general truths, you're in a good shape. But even like standard processes can change immensely with a small change of an app. So all I have to do is change one thing, and suddenly the entire process becomes easier. So I think that's a great idea. And then actually you could revisit that in years to come too, Rob, which would be kind of awesome, because you could come back and say, well, here's the latest on this concept, which is kind of fun. That's a neat way to keep the book alive.
Yeah, I think so. Plus, it's just fun. It's just so great to have so many different people on. I mean, we met on Twitter, I think. So, and only very recently in person at the when you came to present for the Maryland Music Educators Association just last month.
I appreciate that opportunity to come out there. I want to thank you again for all that you did to make that happen. But it was really fun to be out there in Maryland. It was a little bit colder than going down to Texas, which you had been to just a couple days before. And but no, it was just fun to be there and to talk with you and to get to know you and then get to know some other people. There was really a good time, and I just wish I'd been there when I could actually go see the Orioles play, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, well, next time it's a really good reason to come back.
It is. I'd love to come back and then also drive 30 minutes or 45 minutes south just to visit DC while I was there too. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, so that's a good segue. So when you came to present for the Maryland Music Educators Association conference, you did a number of sessions, many of which focused on iPad apps. You did actually, it's funny, 2 of your sessions are actually like the 2 chapters of the book that we're going to address in the 2 episodes we're going to do together. So like the first of these sessions you did was a whole hour long on just scanning. And I thought, it'd be fun to kind of talk about like what is some of our common ground with scanning, like what are the workflows and the apps and the hardware devices we're using in common, and then what are some of the things that you're using that maybe are not in the book, because there were some things you mentioned in your session, both ways of getting paper into a digital system that are not necessarily related to software applications, but then also there were some software applications you also talked about that were that you focused on in a way that I don't quite in the book. So I thought we could just cover a little bit of all of it.
Okay, sounds great.
Awesome. So and I'm going to make a quick change here. My AirPods are like being a little flaky. I'm going to just plug in a good old set of headphones. straight.
Okay, that's what I'm running with too. Yep, I'm doing the same thing.
Oh, there we go. That's so much. I just feel so much. It's much more reliable already.
And the audio is so much deeper on this end. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, just now,
yes.
You noticed a difference?
Well, yeah. There's a huge difference in your spoken audio. Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny because you're getting the Mac microphone now and not the AirPods microphone. Yeah, I'm not speaking to you through the Audio Technica that I'm using. That's going directly into my iPad. Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, the new Mac is great. It has really, really good speakers. I guess I haven't really given the microphone any thought because I've never been on the receiving end.
Well, the mic seems to be pretty nice, so I'll take that. It sounds good.
All right.
So
awesome. 1 point for
what part did you want to focus on or start talking about with the scanning issue then? When I okay, go for it.
Yeah, sure. No, I had an idea. I mean, there's two pieces to it for me. And I think that music educators will gravitate towards both for different reasons. For me, there's the productivity part of it, and then there's the directly more musical part of it, which, I mean, when I do a session at a conference and I start talking about doing scores on an iPad, like people's eyes light up. Like that's clearly what people are hungry for. But there's this whole world of like productivity. I mean, the scanning is really like if you embrace it in the paperless lifestyle, like this stuff has so many applications across your entire life that it's really crazy to think about like what we did before it was around.
Well, and what most people are still doing.
Right.
I mean, just straight out. Well, the way that I always approach it is I start off by talking about there's really two reasons that you want to scan music. The first one is you want to convert a paper resource into a digital resource. And that would fall into your area of organization, I would think. The other one is when you scan music with the intent of doing something digitally beyond just substituting it for paper. So, and sometimes you have to do step one to get to step two in that process. So, for example, if I want to rearrange a score, or I want to do an edit of an existing score where there's misprints like crazy, public domain or not, then that's a whole nother way of looking at it. So there's two different worlds about scanning, and people want to generally do both, although there are some paper traditionalists who don't want to let their paper go. And I'm one of those people that doesn't understand those people. Because, I've dealt with voice books like the 24 Italian art songs and arias for years, and there's nothing more fun than having a page turn on you while you're trying to work with a kid or you're trying to play piano or whatever it might be, and you lose your spot and an entire performance is ruined potentially with an errant page. And when you've gone digital, that stuff doesn't happen. So, I don't know, there's all sorts of things we can talk about in this category.
Yeah, well, I think you hit on a whole bunch of stuff just there. I mean, before even talking about how to scan, I'm wondering maybe could we talk about briefly, like, what are all of those reasons why we scan? Like you first mentioned just getting something into a paperless form, but then, of course, there's that extra layer to it. What can you do with something that's digital that you can't do with something that's paper? And I think that is, I think, the best setup for someone who's listening to this and maybe has not taken the plunge. They're going to want to wonder, why am I going to invest all of this time into scanning this paper? And I think, the workload certainly is a little heavier up front, but there's a ton of things. I mean, you were talking just about music, but I'm even just scanning like documents from your workplace. Why do we scan? I mean, text search is one that I can think of.
Yeah, and you take a little different bent too, where you go from it on the approach, and you're obviously your book, right? You're focused on organization as a whole, and I've had the chance to meet you and see what you do, and you live this. I mean, that's the cool part about it, is when you come and you present to people and you talk to people, this isn't something that you're just making up. It's you live this flow of workflow. So you're also one of those persons that I would label as an Evernote person. And and we can talk about Evernote too, because I know it's one of the apps that you use. But so you're one of those persons that likes to get everything you've got accessible digital, in that context. So I think you'll scan just about anything that comes across your desk, right? Isn't that kind of one of the things that you'll do?
Yeah, pretty much. And it'll typically, if it's not sheet music, it'll typically go either into Evernote, which is a note-taking application, or it'll go into the file system on my computer. And in either case, it is OCR'd, which means that it is made text searchable, so that if I'm searching the contents of my hard drive, like searching the Finder or using the Spotlight, I can type a word that's in the body of a journal article or a staff, a set of staff meeting notes, and I will be able to find all the files on my hard drive at a moment's notice that contain those words. The story I always tell is, when I first bought my Fujitsu Scansnap, which we'll talk about in a second, I had all these orange crates, like these plastic orange crates of documents that I had kept from my undergraduate and graduate degrees, just teaching resources, concert programs, and all this kind of stuff. And the very first thing I did when I got my first scanner is I zipped all of that stuff through it and converted it all into text searchable documents on my computer. And I got instant gratification from doing that just about a week later when a friend of mine and I were talking about tuning in the band classroom. And I had remembered this Walter Piston article about intonation. And I knew I had read it I knew it was something that my mentor teacher had given to me. And I figured, I wonder if I scanned that the other night. And I took out my phone because Evernote syncs all of your PDF files across every device. I typed in the word intonation in the search, and the first hit was the exact article that I was thinking about. And you could even see it had highlighted every instance of the word intonation in the text.
So for your case, then, it becomes a way to instantly search for things. And in that same vein, tax time, being able to scan receipts and keep track of things that you've purchased, underneath that education ability to claim as an educator your education expenses or the money that you've spent on teaching. All those things come into play. Now, I don't scan everything as aggressively, and I think that's the right word, is aggressively, because you really make a point of, I think you're one of those touch-it-once people, where you only touch a piece of paper once and that's it. And I get that. But I don't know if I follow that aggressively, although there are certain things like I do. For example, if I'm taking notes at a staff meeting or if I'm taking notes at church or whatever it might be, I'm using an app like Notability or something where I'm actually kind of finding a weird non-digital part in a digital world, although those things could be exported as PDFs to a service like Evernote too. But what always confuses me about Evernote, and where I'm just one of those persons that's just typically not an Evernote person, is dumping everything into the cauldron and then expecting it to kind of come out. I get it, but there's some part of me that likes to be more structured than that. So that, to me, that's kind of like Harry Potter. If you ever watched or read all the Harry Potters, where he's going to the pensieve and he's, Dumbledore's putting his thoughts in the pensieve and they just kind of all mix around in there. And I just kind of, sometimes I see it that way. So I certainly don't begrudge anybody for doing that. There's some part of me that likes to be able to also search for notes in a very organized fashion when I need them. But that doesn't mean I have like filing cabinets at my house either. I think we've scanned all of our pictures. We've scanned all of our important documents are in various places like Dropbox or other services too.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, Evernote affords you the option to do that organization. I typically don't, though. I find that the search is good enough that I can usually find what I want in a couple of keystrokes. But yeah, no, you hit on a couple of other things there, though. I mean, that Evernote is not always the friendliest software, but even just a couple of those types of documents you mentioned, like scribbling notes on something like you described using Notability, which is a great iOS app where you can scan something and then draw on it with a stylus on your iPad screen. Well, with Evernote, you can actually you can do that too, but you can also go the opposite direction. You can take a handwritten note, like a document that you've scribbled on with a pen or a pencil, And if you scan it into Evernote, Evernote will actually, in its premium version, search the text of your handwritten notes, whether they were done with a stylus or with a pen or a pencil before you scanned it in, which is kind of a cool feature. Like, it works better than you would expect. There are times where I, will type in a keyword into the search, and sure enough, it will highlight the instances of my having written that word and across all of my documents.
I don't even know how college kids today survive without something like Evernote or in that context of things. I think of how I went through college, which was now 20 years ago, and the stacks of paper and 3-ring binders and crazy studying, and just it would seem so much easier with a tablet and with some of these apps today than what we did in those days. So I don't know. It's just interesting to think about how technology changes and how culture should be changing. Although I'm not sure it does. I think college is still filled with a lot of 3-ring binders and kids writing copious notes and not being able to search what they write.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to watch it unfold. I think what I just shared there is plenty to think on if you're an educator. I mean, basically the utility outside of musical related content is simply that the ability to work with something that's on a computer screen is far more flexible. It's with you everywhere. It's searchable. I don't know that I need to get into that especially since there's going to be an entire episode of this just based around the topic of the PDF file, which is something that I'm very passionate about. But I think that whole other category of musical notation is really where you've spent the most time, and so let's talk about that, I guess, for a moment. Like, there's plenty of reasons to scan musical content. What are some things that you can do with your musical notation on a screen that you cannot do with it in the physical world?
Well, that depends on whether we're talking about that first format where you're scanning just to convert it, or whether you're scanning to do other things with it. Because what you can do in both realms is a little bit different. In that first realm, if you have sheet music, when you enter into an app like Fourscore, which that's another session, another podcast at another time, there are so many things you can do now with that PDF in that app. It's amazing how that there's so many other sub tools for musicians in there. But once you, and then think about also my father, his men's chorus in Milwaukee, they meet at a VFW post, and they're sponsored by the VFW post, and there was a fire in the VFW post, and the entire music storage room was flooded, and all the music was soaked and had to be professionally dried, and actually still is wrinkled and smells funny, and it's almost a total loss. Well, if you have your music digitally, you don't have to worry about the effects of rain or snow or sleet. Now, you might have to worry about that for your tablet, but you don't have to worry about that for the music. It's out there in the cloud if you're smart and you're backing it up in one or two places. You can write on it, you can annotate on it, you can save various copies of it if you don't want your past annotations to influence your current thinking, which I understand there's some composers and conductors that like to do that. And there's just so much you can do. The second side, again, is the flexibility of once you scan something and recognized it with other software solutions, the ability to morph that music into other things, anything from a rehearsal file to an accompanist to transpositions to rearranging to orchestrating. It opens up just an endless world of choices for the music educator. So again, you get into that whole point of you get the flexibility and reliability of digital music versus a page. Even though some people still like that feel of paper in their hands, I get that. Well, maybe someday we'll have an e-ink paper that looks just like a sheet of paper.
Oh, you're talking in my dreams now. I mean, that's so a full. Someone once described to me beautifully the future of the tablet, and it was like a full color e-ink display that had a that could shapeshift its shape to basically put a physical keyboard
Yes.
on the screen. And I was like, that sounds glorious.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever see it, but it's an interesting concept. But I when I was in high school, I envisioned what would it be like if we all had like a computer screen for everyone to play off of in band. And that was way back in the late 1980s. I was envisioning that. I should have trademarked that concept or patented that concept, because it was later followed by that whole Music Pad Pro, which eventually, the iPad with Fourscore and other apps like it, UnRealBook, really changed that. But it's interesting to think about where the future will be in 10 years, 15 years. But I would tell most people is, if you're not interested in using digital music, the people that replace you will be. And I think that's kind of a scary way to put it, but I think it's true.
Yeah, totally. So how are you getting stuff from the real world into your screen? I break it down into two categories. There's hardware and there's software, and then there's also sort of some third-party services you can consult. For me, it's either either goes into my Fujitsu Scansnap, which is a line of hardware devices that can do very, very fast scanning and integrate with the software of your computer. It either goes into that, or I scan it directly from my iPhone using some scanning software. And for me, the Scansnap that I have is fantastic. It can zip about 30 pieces of paper through it in just a matter of moments. It can, at the touch of a button, OCR the text and save it to my Dropbox account or my Evernote account. Unfortunately, it does not handle paper bigger than 8 by 11, so it is largely a document scanner, and for music, I find myself looking for other options. But for just doing documents, it's fantastic. I totally recommend looking into that line.
Yeah, I use a Canon, one of the Pixmas. It's a little portable scanner that I have, the P150, and they've got a newer version out. That's the P215II. And actually, Fraser Spears also turned me on to that particular device years ago. And it does basically the same thing. It doesn't. I don't think it has OCR, although you can certainly buy, apps on your computer that will do that for you. But it's a duplex, so it scans both the front and the back at the same time. Scanner that scans very quickly. And again, being a choral person most of the time, although I'm a tuba player as well in my background, being a choral person professionally, scanning choral octavos is no big deal on a scanner that's 8.5 by 11. But once you become a band director or an orchestra director, where it seems like they've got some pieces of paper that are larger than the folders that they give you for free from all those music stores, what do you do with that? And my other solution was we bought a Scansnap, the SV600, that looks a little bit like Wall-E, and it will actually scan a much larger surface area. It almost looks like one of those old overhead projectors, and it scans with the head actually moves. Although there are better options that you could get, but you go into quickly with a large size duplex document scanner into the $2,000 range, and that's out of the budgets of most people.
Yeah, that's kind of where it falls. I mean, for me, mine is the Fujitsu Scansnap XI500, and it sounds very similar to your Canon. Most people are not going to be willing to spend that on a scanner. Certainly, the Fujitsu and I'm sure the Canon line offer cheaper options. I know there's a portable Fujitsu that can fit into a briefcase, and I think it's a single sheet at a time, and it's still quite fast. But
yeah, mine is that's the Canon ones I'm recommending are portable ones that will fit in your briefcase, and they price at about $250. And that, I mean, some people kind of balk at that, but when you think about how much your time is worth, and I told the story at Maryland too, is I once scanned an entire library of choral music using a flatbed scanner on my printer, page by page by page by page, and it took months to do. So what I would do is, when my son was very little, my 8-year-old was very little, like 1, he'd be rolling around on the floor and I'd be scanning page after page as we watched TV and just hung out at night. and that was extremely slow. And it got to the point where down the road where I moved into my most recent school, I scan a library of 1,300 titles in about a week.
Wow.
Yeah, so your time is money ultimately. So it's worth that $250, and if you were a band director, it might be worth the $2,000 in a larger district. And I know you guys in Maryland have a very different setup where a district is by a county, whereas here it's just a random selection of schools in Minnesota. Same with Wisconsin, as far as I know, often circled around a town, but if you have a smaller community, you might have a number of schools that are together in the same district, but not county-based. So, I mean, you could find that your district would be willing to spend $2,000 on a device that could be shared amongst teachers in a district. So it becomes an issue of time. There's a couple other solutions too. Some people ask, why not scan with a photocopier? And photocopiers are okay. I mean, they've got document imaging. The problems that I have with them is that they still don't do a good job of auto-cropping, because my Canon will actually auto-crop the page, which is wonderful. I don't know if yours does the same thing, Rob?
Well, so it has a straightener.
Okay.
That kind of pulls it through straight. But yes, it does also have that auto cropping, and that's the essential problem. I mean, every educator has been through this problem of trying to use oversized paper, and you don't know quite how to manage the settings, the copy settings. So you're kind of like lipping the edge corner of the page over the side of the scanner, and you hit the button, but then you cut off the last line of the music, so you try it again, and this time it was a little bit slanted, and you can't crop the edges, and it's just this like funny dance that every music educator has done with a photocopier before that is entirely solved by this new software and hardware.
Yeah, and if you scan a book, the warp pages on the edge, as they kind of go to the binding, band directors that I universally know how to take a band score and shrink it to the right size for a page. And many already photocopy their music for various reasons right off the bat. That's one of the first things they do with the score is they go and they photocopy it and kind of have a full set of photocopies in along with their score to do things with. Now, once you get to that, then it's really easy to use one of those automatic document feeders, scanners, whether it be your Fujitsu or my Canon to scan that. But it'd be really nice to have something as a band director that you didn't have to do that. But then again, you guys have a little different challenge, you in orchestra and band, than we choral people do, because we have 8 to 16 pages typically in a score that, you scan that one part, and that's the only part for everybody. Everybody's represented in that score. Whereas you guys in band and in orchestra, you might have, probably between up to 30 parts, and everybody's got 3 to 4 pages, and the organizational task of keeping those all together and how you want to approach that is a little bit more complicated than choir. Gotta be honest with you.
Yeah, there's certainly more to copy, and especially if you use this for any reason. Like, I know one of the things that I do with scanning is I scan parts, and that is one way that we allow our students to practice their music. We have a password protected part of our website where, for the purpose of practice only, our students can log on, type in a password, and they can get access to all their sheet music. And that takes a really long time being in the band world. It's like tenor sax 1, tenor sax 2, piccolo 1, piccolo 2, flute 1, flute 2, percussion 1, percussion 2, percussion 3, mallet percussion, timpani. Like, the list just goes on and on. And
then you also have the conductor's score. And in the case of some elementary music or beginning band, or middle level beginning band music, you might have an entire supplement, like some of that Bruce Pearson stuff that he's done in recent years will have a combination of like coursework stuff that you can do with it too, for kind of a comprehensive music education thing. So you could have quite a few things, and I guess a band director will have to think how they want to scan that and be organized with that. But I did want to say that Paul Shimmons, who, again, we do that podcast with, Paul has talked about how wonderful it is once you scan that score. When he has a lesson, he can actually pull up the entire large combination scan score that he's got, and he can sit in the band office or whatever with the student with the lesson and actually interact with that student watching their part. And, because what happens if you have a band score that's got the condensed score versus all the parts shown, and knowing what part they play, that can make some things much, much easier. Incidentally, for band and orchestra directors, the other real benefit of having scanned music is when you have stuff that is in the public domain, and you can go to places like the PDF Band Music Library or the IMSLP, and you can go into there and you can actually get a hold of music that's totally in the public domain, totally fair to photocopy and share, but not have to pay for it. And the only sad part there is that publishers will still happily take your money for things like the whole suite when that is totally in the public domain. So, but it's out there. So there's a real benefit to that, too, that you could have some cost savings for what would be considered traditional classical band and orchestra literature, instead of spending your limited dollars for music budget on something that already exists, or for replacement parts. Talk about that challenge. That's the other cool part about having things scanned, is that in the event that you do have a kid that loses a part, you don't lose that bassoon one part forever. Although the music publishers would be happy to tell you that then they would assume that you would have to legally buy a whole nother set of music to stay legal with copyright, but copyright's a whole nother issue.
Yeah, we're not going to touch that right now. So for those who are running into the technical limitations of a hardware scanner, or simply just don't want to go out and spend $100, $200 on a scanner, gosh, the cameras on the phones are so good these days that like the apps that you can put on a phone are just out of this world, like some of the software that you can use to scan straight from the camera on your phone. Before we get to that, though, there are a couple of third-party options you mentioned in your session last month that I thought were cool. Like you mentioned the dollar scan service.
Yep, $1 scan. It's the number $1 scan, and it's out in California. And what you do is you send them music, and they will scan 100 pages of music for...
Not just music, right? Like
anything.
Any book.
Yeah, but we're talking the context. Yeah, books too. If you want to scan, you had your favorite conducting book that you've wanted to hold on to, and you've been afraid to, it's no longer the current edition. You know what I mean? Because they keep making, remember that in college?
Right.
Where you'd...
No, this is funny. Yeah. Well, it's funny because we were talking about this, and this is one of those areas where I hang on to the physical paper because I don't want to destroy my poor Western anthology of Western, history of Western music. And you were just saying I don't care. They can tear it to shreds as long as I get my digital copy.
And what they do is they take your book and they destroy it, and you sign an affidavit saying that was your book and you owned it, and they send you a digital copy that basically has a disclaimer on the last page, which you sign, that says, hey, I own this book physically. I decided to scan it for my own personal reasons, and therefore it's mine. Although there is one publisher that they will no longer scan with under some agreement. I'm sure that the publishers threatened lawsuit, and so they came to agreement that just won't scan any more books. I can't remember who that publisher is. I'd have to look it up. It's not a music publisher, though. It's an academic publisher. Right.
Yeah, there's maybe I'm just romanticizing the idea of having a bookshelf of interesting books on display in my home. Having some of my old music textbooks torn to pieces is not appealing, but I gotta say, to be able to text search, an OCR copy of a music history textbook is a very attractive idea to me.
And I use an example, and again, I had those Earth Song vocal diction books that are huge and thick and, about 2 inches thick. And I sent them out to get scanned so that I could have that information with me at any point rather than having to go home or go to my office to look up things, So to have some of those sources where you can actually look them up anywhere in the world because it's saved again in the cloud versus having to go to a physical location is pretty awesome. Incidentally, that's one of the things we're working on with IMSLP. They're going to be starting a Kickstarter here where in connection with the people from MuseScore of converting every song in IMSLP over the next number of years into music XML format, which once you do that, there's all sorts of things you can do. But it's just kind of another neat extension on that same thought of scanning existing books. So $1 scan's been pretty good. In fact, I just ordered a few more voice books and some other things to use in my own school, and I ordered 2 copies, one for us to have on the shelf and the other to send to $1 scan to rip apart and digitize.
I haven't taken the plunge. I'm looking at, right now I'm in my studio, and I'm looking at my shelf that contains most of my method books, music texts, and other resources. And it's so tempting. I'm not there yet, but I'll have to let you know if I ever decide to just tear them all to pieces.
And you're in the same spot that a lot of people are with physical CDs. It's an interesting shift because there are people that don't want to let go.
It's so
of that.
funny.
Yeah.
I don't. It's funny. I don't care about those at all.
Yeah.
I just don't.
And some people, they want that. In fact, Paul Simmons, using Paul again, we were talking about this. Paul wants to actually read the jacket of the CD. He wants to read the cover and the back, and then he may never touch that one again, but he knows that it's there. So, all of us, even though we're techie people, we have these things we just can't let go. It's...
I get it, though. I mean, it's the same reason why, like I have some LPs that I love to keep out, and listen to. I mean, it's tough, though, because I just wish that I could have it both ways, because I think a bookshelf, well, and this gets to back to the original topic too, which is like, are there times where physical media is superior? And I do think that there are moments where I'm in my studio with a student where thumbing through the pages of a physical book is just simply faster if I know where something is in the book.
I'm trying to think if I've ever had that experience in the sense I've moved musically, and actually most of my books that I would read, either I've obtained ebooks, bought ebooks, or whatever that have that same book. So even our bookshelf has shrunk. We've donated a ton of our stuff over the years to Goodwill and Salvation Army because we just aren't going to use it anymore. So I can't think of many situations, because again, with like a book, I can text search in a second in any book and come up with what I'm looking for faster than I could ever find it, by flipping through it.
The other thing, too, is with the method books, like if I'm in a lesson and I want to have a student sight read something, like taking a book off of the shelf and opening the page and then putting that book on the music stand in front of them, like I don't have a device in my home. Like, I mean, if it's on my iPad, then awesome, but I'm not going to put my iPad on the music stand in front of them. I could, but that just doesn't appeal to me.
See, that's where I'm at, where we have one iPad that's basically for student use so above and beyond, because we're in a one-to-one school system. So,
right.
So the kids already have their own iPad, but I have a second one that we can use for school purposes that we used some fundraising money to buy. And so if I ever need to do that, and actually we're doing that at various times. Our musical right now, when you do a middle school musical, generally you use the soundtrack that comes from Disney. It's accepted to be okay that's what you do, because that's what everybody does. You have this orchestra, because you aren't going to have a middle school orchestra that can handle the scores and other things. So, but the entire show is run audibly from Fourscore, and again, that's for another session. But it's amazing how when you have that extra device, it can really be used in a number of ways that you never planned on.
Right. All right, save this topic for the Fourscore episode. Yeah. I want to. The idea is basically, because Fourscore, and I've talked with them about this before. I don't think that, like, of all the apps I have that can sync documents, I don't think that there's a really good way to sync Fourscore libraries from one device to the next. Just, we don't have to talk about it.
No,
I'm just saying.
I'm with you. I agree, and I think that's something that they need to address. Yeah, that's
right. So
that's another topic for another day.
More on that. Totally. So we're really far in. We haven't even talked about what I feel like is really the most accessible way to scan, which is just apps on the phone. And I'm wondering, like, I've got kind of two. I've got a lot in my book that I mentioned, but I've got two that I really strongly recommend, and they are Scannable and Scanner Pro. And Scannable is, because there's a whole chapter on note-taking with Evernote in the book as far as getting organized with it. Scannable's main appeal is that it is created by Evernote and it links to your Evernote account. So pretty much the second you tap the icon to launch the app, it's looking for paper. And the general essence of these apps is actually, I guess I'll explain what Scannable does, but all of these apps in this category do these couple of basic things. Basically, it's like looking for the four edges of a piece of paper using the camera of my phone. And then once it finds those four edges, it will take a snapshot, trim the four edges of the paper. If it's taken at an angle, or if it's a book and the page is bent a little bit, it will align those four edges so that it is a perfect square shaped, and then it will make it grayscale and make it text searchable. So it's basically taking any piece of paper I put it over, and it's turning it into what looks like a clean, precise PDF file, almost as if you had created it in Microsoft Word, and just saved it as a PDF. That's the general essence of these scanning apps. Now, Scannable itself is great because then without even tapping any extra buttons, it saves all that stuff to Evernote text searchable. So it's cool. It's really easy it's a nice workflow getting it to my Mac because I simply tap the icon, hold it over the page, and then boom, it's like done. Like there are like 0 steps to it. It has some of their basic sharing features, like I can send it in as an email to someone. It uses an iOS. It has that, you can hit the share button and pretty much export it to basically any type of service you can imagine. Am I missing any of the primary features here of a scanning app?
I don't think so. I'd be interested to hear if Scannable does one thing. I have no problem using a camera phone to scan something, with the exception of resulting size of file. Because what ends up happening is that most of the apps still save the scan as a full picture, and on these camera phones today, that's a really large file. And so if you scan, 30 pages, you could have a rather large resulting document. Now, maybe Scannable, when it converts it to another format, lowers that size. But if you have an older iPad, it can get tripped up on that, which can be an issue. And the only other thing that I caution people with too is that if you want to do something else with your score, you've got to make sure that even the edge detection and everything else doesn't also warp the page in such a way that it makes it impossible for Music OCR to not be able to recognize that PDF. And that's something else to keep in mind. So those are the two cautions I would have with it. But if you're in an emergency and you need to scan a score very, very quickly, I don't have any problem with that. But I would generally recommend people to try to use a traditional scanner of some kind if you're going to make a long-term lasting scan that you only want to scan once, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I have done a lot of scanning with the phone this year, and I have not run into any problems with any of my parts or scores. I know, of course, documents, that goes unsaid. I mean, I have run into no problems with my documents. Now, my documents, I don't really care if they're as pretty because they're largely being stored as reference.
Right.
The way that a score or a part looks is important to me, but I have found that apps like Scannable do a fantastic job of looking legible, and the file size has not been an issue for me. I largely send these files immediately to a cloud-based service like Evernote or Dropbox. So it's not a space concern on my iPad. Scannable will allow you to choose whether it's a JPEG file or a PDF. I have found that even large 30 to 40 plus page PDFs are not unmanageable.
Right. I'm talking more in terms of actually your device's ability to handle the size of the PDF. And to be honest, you're not going to see that because you're running iPad Pro 12.9 inch, with the fastest processor. But if you're running an iPad 2, the 30-pin iPad 2, it can get bogged down with a really large PDF document in one of those readers. So
I see. We're talking about processing power and memory.
Yep. So ultimately that's where my concern lies. And I kind of go back. There was a guy named Hugh Sung, actually still around, and he used to work with the people at AirTurn that make the wireless page turners for the AirTurn company. And actually, there's another company too called PageFlip that just came out with some new devices as well. But those are the two big ones. But anyway, Hugh wrote a book when he was working very closely with the company, and since then he's kind of broken away from them a little bit. But he wrote a book called From Paper to Pixels. And his recommendation was, scanning with a traditional scanner at 300 DPI in a black and white or line art format, because in music we're dealing with just black and white. And so the idea is a resulting file that's small. Now again, as you get newer devices, they can handle huge files. I have a PowerPoint or a Keynote that I'm doing right now where I'm embedding YouTube videos from that are ukulele play-alongs, and my presentation file is now over 1 gigabyte in size, and the iPad can run it just fine. However, if I was on an older iPad, I'm not sure that that's true. So it's just it's just one of those things to be aware of, that again, being people that are techie, we like to stay up to date with our devices, but there are so many people that don't. You need to make sure that the solutions will work for them too. There's nothing worse than recommending something and then they go to run it and it won't work.
Sure. Yeah, so my only counterpoint to this is that I would imagine that most people keep their phone more up to date than they do their tablet. Yes. And I do almost all of my scanning from the phone, not from the tablet.
Yep, and my reaction to that, counter reaction would be, but they do most of their reading of like a scanned PDF typically on a tablet. And their tablet may be way more out of date than their phone.
Right.
So that'd be my counterpoint. But that's, and we don't even disagree there. I'm saying I have no problem with that, but it's just, the other issue sometimes I have is with lighting, because if you're standing in a weird spot with, your phone scanner, you can get a weird shadow from yourself or the phone on the page, even using the flash. So there's,
the worst is having a light directly above you and you get that little bright spot.
Yep. So those are things you need to be aware of. And you can actually find online some plans of how to build a kind of a scanner, a base, even out of cardboard. And the one that I just saw, Tony Vincent is another guy that talks a lot about technology and education. He's not just iPad, he's everything. He recommends one of those milk crates with, it's not really a milk crate, but one of those metal, like classroom crates that kind of looks like chicken wire a little bit, thick chicken wire, and putting your document underneath the crate and then putting your phone on top of the crate to take the picture when you're going to make your phone into a scanner. So just other ways to think about doing things that, that therefore your camera's held steady and you get the clearest possible picture and all those fun things.
Sure. Yeah, that's all really good stuff. So another one I wanted to mention, and then I'm curious if you have a favorite. Scanner Pro is another really, really great app. This is actually, it's funny. Both of these apps are iOS only.
Yep.
So Scanner Pro is made by the guys. Is it Riedel or Redel?
I think it's Riedel.
Yeah, they're such a great little software company. They make some of the best productivity apps for iOS. They make a great PDF app, PDF Expert. They make an app for managing documents on the iPad called Documents, and they've got this really great little scanning app called Scanner Pro. And Scanner Pro does one or two things that Scannable doesn't do. It's not linked to Evernote, but you can put in your Evernote credentials and essentially get the same feature out of it in one extra tap. You can save stuff to Evernote. But it also supports this feature where it'll actually scan your photo roll and look for stuff that it thinks you might have taken a picture of that's a document. So even if you if you needed to just take a quick picture of a document in the moment straight from the camera, it'll actually go like back through those documents and it can turn them into, really like richly detailed and edited PDFs. That's kind of cool. The other thing it does is it's got this workflow feature where if you have a specific folder you like to save your documents to, or if you have a couple of things that you like to do with a document once you've scanned it, you can actually string all of those into one different tap. So like a really great example is if I wanted to maybe like save something to my Evernote notebook and add a couple of different tags to the file so I could search it later. And I also wanted to save that file to a specific folder hierarchy in my Dropbox account. And then maybe if I wanted to email that file to a colleague of mine, I could string all of that into one giant workflow where I could just tap a button and it would perform all of that stuff on that scan, which is kind of nice if you're a power user geek like me. The other thing it does is, it has an iCloud folder. It integrates right in with iCloud Drive, so you don't actually even have to press any buttons at all once you do the scan. You can just get on your Mac and it's like living right in your iCloud Drive without even having really done anything other than just holding the camera above the page.
Yeah, iCloud is really developing into a nice side feature of Apple, quietly and not making a big splash. Although, I mean, Steve Jobs tried to buy Dropbox years ago and Dropbox said no. Kind of interesting to think what it would be like today had that happened. But that apps that have that really smooth integration with iCloud Drive it's really a nice feature. Other apps like Notion and other things have really good applications for that too.
Yeah, I like it. It's nice to just kind of, not have to think twice about it. It's just to know that you held your camera over the document, and now if you go to your Mac, it's already there. It's just waiting for you.
It's really cool. Some of the other ones, I mean, you've hit Scanner Pro. Some other ones I'm looking at just on my own device here. I've got Tiny Scanner. There's.
That's a great one, and that one has an Android app too, which is really important.
There's 100 of these things. Genius Scan. Fine Scanner Pro, and the one that was actually brought to my attention from the creator of UnRealBook was an app called Jotnot, and that's what he uses. Now, the other one that I would also just say is inside of Fourscore, there is a embedded camera as well. They call it Darkroom. So if you're using Fourscore exclusively as a music reader, you've got the ability to take a picture, and it's doing some new things too. Their most recent version, which they just updated, and it might be still in beta, but if not, it's coming out really soon, has some more features for that scanner, which is they used to have a standalone, but they took that off the market. So it's another way to do it. Is a lot of these PDF music readers that are made for music educators or musicians in general have lots of other features.
Yeah, that's cool. I haven't actually used the Fourscore scanning feature.
Again, for me, it's only in an emergency situation because I've got everything starting off digital. That's where I come from. So yeah, this is that's a lot of good apps, and I gotta add these to I'm gonna add these all to the show notes of this podcast episode on my website. But I gotta put these in my notes for my next session, because the number one question I always get is, we don't have to talk about this at length now, but how does Android get to play? Sadly, this is just one of many areas where I don't feel like the best apps in this category are on the Android platform. Yeah, a lot of the stuff. I mean, some like Evernote obviously is out there, but a lot of the apps that are really good for productivity for music teachers in general are lacking on Android, and that's because developers follow where the money is. I've gotten a chance to talk to a number of developers over the years, and I know developers that are Android first. They love Android. They just love the freedom of that programming system versus the confines of Apple. But when push comes to shove, they all find their way eventually to iOS because that's where the money is there to be made. So if people ever wonder why that is, it's not really because developers hate Android. It's just they need to feed their families. You know, I mean, it's kind of a sad story, but it's true. So
yeah. So there's like this area of scanning that is something that you're very knowledgeable about, but that is not really a central focus of this chapter in the book. And that is this area of software that can scan music directly to an XML file.
Yep.
So everything we've discussed so far, we are basically getting a document from a paper document into a computer, and we are interacting with it essentially as a PDF file. Even though we're talking about scores, we're basically, like an app like Fourscore is really just a glorified PDF reader with musician tools.
Yes. Yep. That's 100% true. There are a number of apps that will allow you to take a score and convert it into music XML format that then you can do pretty much anything you want with the file. And let's talk about a few of those. The first one would be a Mac and PC program that's called Photoscore Ultimate, and it now comes with an additional app called Notate Me as well, and that is made by Neurotron. It was updated, I don't know, I think it was 2015. No, it was more recently than that. Maybe 2016 it was updated with a large release, and that app in particular goes quite a while before it has a major update. And that is a scanning software that comes with Sibelius. And if you have that program on your Mac, it's a $250 program, or PC, whatever you have, you can open up a PDF and it will recognize that PDF and get as close as it can to convert notes to notes, diacritical markings to diacritical markings, and text to text. Another similar program is one that used to be bundled with Finale. Finale just recently removed scanning altogether, which is a whole other story, and that would be SmartScore. And the most recent version of SmartScore is SmartScore X2, Pro X2. And I am not a big fan of SmartScore. Sorry, it isn't as accurate for me as Photoscore. So if you're going to spend the money, I have to say, honestly, in my own experience, Photoscore is better. So those are Mac or PC programs. The other one that's worth checking out, by the way, incidentally, is this. If you have a score that was generated by a notation program, like Finale or Sibelius, there's a program called Music to PDF Pro, and you can take that software, open up a PDF that was generated, for example, by Finale, or generated by Lilypad, whatever the notation app might be. And what the catch is, your PDF file generated by that program is actually a text file versus an image. So it converts the text into a music XML, and it works pretty well. And I've saved myself hours of time by having that program, which is another $250 program. So to get solutions for your computer, you're looking at $250 each. And if you get Photoscore and Music to PDF Pro, it's another $250. So that's a $500 investment plus your computer.
Music to PDF Pro is new to me. That's great. So that is, you said that is a PC?
Yeah, it's PC, Mac.
Program.
Yep, PC and Mac. And
okay.
I think it's made by Myriad Software, Myriad. And that's a French company as well. But it works pretty well. They also have a freaky ability in there that if you scan a piece of music and recognize it with the app, it'll actually sing it back to you if there's words, which is with a synthesized voice. It's kind of creepy, but it's fun to play with. And I had a teacher at ACDA a couple of years. In fact, ACDA is here in Minnesota this next week, and I'm not even going to it this time around. But when it was at Salt Lake City, a teacher came up and said that he rescans all of his PDFs. He scans everything and then exports it back out and into that software to generate rehearsal files with sung words for his students in his choirs. And I was like, wow, that's a really complicated way of doing it, but it would work. So those are the computer solutions. But then once you get to your phone, there's some other options. One works on Android or iOS, and it's called Notate Me, and it's made by Neurotron. And Notate.me is a $40 app that allows you to handwrite music, and as you handwrite music, it turns it into digital music. And that used to be a novel thing, but there's now 7 or 8 programs that do that, so its novelty is no longer there. And there are also cheaper solutions to that. So after you get your music in, and ultimately that's not what that program's really good for. If you spend another $30, there's a Photoscore version that's an in-app purchase, either for Android or iOS, that you can then use your camera phone and take pictures of scores and convert it to digital notation. And on average, that's just about as accurate as using the Mac or PC version. Sometimes one does better than the other, but generally it's pretty close. So versus the cost of software on the Mac, the computer, and everything else, you can actually have a phone and that program for $70 and do a very similar thing. So that's one way to do it. The only negative there is that you cannot open a PDF through Photoscore on your phone. So if you have an existing PDF, you have to get a hold of the actual physical music to scan. You actually have to take a picture of it to do that. And then the other device is, or the only recent solution is a $4 app or $5 app called Music Scanner, Sheet Music Scanner, that's on iOS. And that program is in rapid development. And that is
very impressive app
for $5, and it recognizes pages. And now, granted, there are some flaws. It doesn't scan triplets right now. They're working on it. It doesn't do text, and it has some. It isn't all there, and the developer will tell you that. But he's got a development system, and the funny thing is, it's a single developer in Scotland figuring it all out. We're going to have him on our podcast sometime soon, and that's going to be a fun discussion because these other companies have been in the business for over 20 years doing digital scanning, both SmartScore, which is, I think Musitech is that company, and Neurotron, and here comes this single guy in Scotland who's figured out whatever it needs to take to scan music. So that's definitely worth trying and to see what it can do. Musitech, the makers of SmartScore, do have an app for your phone. I have not had good experience with it, so I did buy it, and I bought the in-app purchase. Not so happy with it. And then Musitech is also offering a new thing called PDF to Music XML, which is a $100 program. And I don't have it. I haven't tried it, but just I'm a little gun shy on Musitech. No insult to them. It's not as accurate for me as some other solutions. Sorry to talk there. I just talked for a whole long time there.
No, it's great. This is the stuff that is like the least covered in the book, and you've used it. That's the thing, is that I'm aware of all this stuff, but I have not pushed it to the limit that you have. Now, I really did. I tried the other day to play around with the sheet music scanner, and I did have some success. And I'll always say, I know this is one of the areas where we differ. I think it's just because you've had much more need to make this software work for you. I have found that in the limited need for this type of category of software, that I like the amount of mistakes I have to fix once it has made the XML file often outweighs the benefit of trying to do it in the first place. That being said, I always recommend that people try to make this stuff work, especially a $4 app. Like I can't not recommend a $4 app that can do something as powerful as Sheet Music Scanner. I mean, it's just incredible.
And if you're dealing with if you're trying to scan an Eric Whitaker piece, that's just not going to cut it. It's going to be a dismal failure, and you're going to have to just start over. But it's amazing what it can do. And in being a choral person, and by the way, for me, that's a need, a necessity. I'm not a great pianist. I'm just not. I'm a tuba player. I'm a singer. I now play ukulele. But just piano has never been my main thing. I can play parts if I need to, but I'm not an accompanist. I'm just not. And it's okay to be not all things, I think, in this world. So technology has filled that role for me. So when I have a choir that needs an accompaniment, I will often generate that accompaniment myself and scan something and do that. And boy, has it gotten better. But see, a lot of people, their experience of scanning goes back to Finale and using the free version of SmartScore, which always just ended up looking like garbage, and people would get frustrated and just quit. And the message I would say to them is, it has changed immensely. And for people, and by the way, those same people don't have the Finale chops, or you're a Sibelius user? Is that what?
Yes, that's the one I'm most familiar with. I actually recently picked up a copy of Dorico, which I've been using the past couple of months. But
yeah,
yes, Sibelius.
I need to do that
for many, many years.
I need to do that too. But the truth is that majority of people that need to do the scanning at that level aren't going to be techie at heart, and they aren't going to be really familiar enough with Finale or Sibelius or whatever to easily and quickly recreate a score. Whereas I think both you or I in our own dependent software solutions, and for me that would be Notion or Finale, and for you that'd be Sibelius or Dorico, and for both of us we could try MuseScore. We could probably recreate a score very rapidly if we had to, but most people aren't in that boat. So this is a great entry, and yeah, you're going to have things to fix. There's going to be problems. That's just, it goes to say, it's why we still don't have machines doing a great job of playing music, from a sheet, because there's so many weird rules of music and things that overlap and don't make any sense, and voices that cross and craziness. So there's all that, but still, you can get such a head start, So you had that great story about a person that talked to you after my presentation that was just devastated, thinking about how much time they had wasted, at night. And the truth is, they might have saved hundreds of hours of their life. I mean, look at how many hours I spent scanning sheet music, for just to put into digital format. So I get it. These jumps in technology, and it's only going to get better. That's my message to people.
Yeah, it always does.
So those are the big ones. I mean, if you're going to interested in scan. Oh, and then the other thing with sheet music scanner is it will open a PDF. And so that's the other thing that's really cool, and I've had some pretty good success with it. But you do have to...
That's what I was doing with it the other night. I was taking scans that I had made in Scannable, and I was drilling down into my Google Drive hierarchy of all my scores and parts. And yeah, I was pulling PDFs of stuff I scanned into my phone, and it was doing a pretty decent job. Where it was struggling was it didn't really know what to do with key changes, and it didn't really know what to do, like where it's a multiple movement piece that I was experimenting with, and it didn't really know how to interpret the breaks in the staff where like one movement would end and another would begin. That problem would have been more easy to rectify with a computer than the fact that like it was confused by the key, like it was putting the key signature in every measure.
Yep. And by the way, incidentally, if you have feedback where a particular song is causing the app a problem, he'll probably tell you right off the bat that it just doesn't handle that quite yet or whatever, but he's always interested in getting a sample of a score and what it did that it messed up, so that down the road when he goes to that part of the roadmap, he has more data to work off of. So that's the other side note that I'd say to everybody with app developers in particular is they do want your feedback, especially the smaller developers, because they want to sell their product. The larger companies might care less, like, yes, Avid and Sibelius, and is there ever going to be a working Sibelius app? Again, those sorts of questions. And the answer is, maybe not. So, but the individual developers want your feedback. So if you run into a problem, contact them, send them the source material and the file that you had, and then they can actually see what's going on.
Yeah, that's great advice. Every developer of every piece of professional music software I have ever encountered on, at least for iOS, has been very responsive to me.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, they really friendly people. Really friendly people.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I thought this was going to be a short one. We covered a lot of material. This is great.
Yeah, it's always good to talk to you, Robbie, and it was good to meet you and get to know you a little bit in our time in Maryland too. So hopefully we'll be running into each other again in other places. So.
Well, and we'll do this again soon, hopefully.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic. So it's already pretty late there too. We're recording this in the evening because unfortunately with the musical and stuff and my kids being in bed. So then I hope it's not too late for you for the next day of school or anything like that.
Oh no! This is actually before my bedtime. What is it? Is it 9:30 for you now?
Yeah, it's 9:30 here. So.
Yeah, that's good. 10:30 for me.
All right.
I've still got. Yeah, very cool. I appreciate you staying up and doing this with me. This has been fun.
Anytime.